The 1908 Olympic Games, which were perhaps the most famous games in history, certainly in the 20th century, were originally scheduled to be held in Rome. However, in 1906, after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius near Naples and assorted disastrous financial woes had beset Italy, the country decided that they couldn't support the games. So one of the world's superpowers, Great Britain, stepped in and they said, we'll hold the games, and proposed London as the host city. My grandfather, Charlie Hefferon, was an elite runner. He was one of the top runners at several distances in the world. He was the South African champion for the 1, the 4, and the 10-mile distance. He was the British Empire champion for the 4-mile distance. And at one period, beginning of the 20th century, he entered 80 races and he won outright 70 of them. And he always came second or third in the others. He was a member of the South African Olympic team. They were considered the top running team, racing team in the world. Charlie Hefferon had at least as much right to call himself a Canadian as he did a South African or a Brit. He spent the majority of his life here. He served in the Canadian Expeditionary Forces in 2 wars, the Boer War and the First World War, and he was on the police force here in Canada, and subsequently killed in action on as a policeman. He played a pivotal role in the 1908 Olympic marathon race. This was the first race that was 26 miles, 385 yards. 385 yards was to accommodate the King and Queen of England, because they were seated in the Royal Box at the White City Stadium. They wanted the race to finish in front of them, obviously. The royal family, Queen Alexandra, encouraged everyone to put flags and bunting and whatever on their homes and along the lampposts and trees in front of their house, so that it would be very colorful. Some 60 marathon runners started that day. Only 28 finished. There's a lot of reasons for that. Athletes were not in the kind of shape they are today, although Charlie Hefferon was examined by the doctors prior to the race and alleged to be in perfect condition, the finest conditioned athlete in the whole games. It was an exceptionally hot day, said to be some 33 degrees Celsius. England was not used to that kind of weather. In this particular race, my grandfather was the favorite. He was expected to win it handily. The first 20 miles or so, he dueled with Tom Longboat, the famous Canadian runner, who was considered his prime challenger. Tom Longboat collapsed at the 20-mile mark. My grandfather continued on, and at the 24-mile mark, he was ahead by the media reports, say 3 to 4 minutes. At that point, he accepted a drink, a cup from a spectator. Some say allegedly was the Toronto Star reporter Lou Marsh. My grandfather, who was deathly allergic to the booze, accepted this cup of champagne and drank it down and immediately collapsed, violently ill on the ground. And where he remained for several minutes, apparently. And while he was on the ground, he was passed by this Italian runner, Dorando Pietri. Dorando entered the stadium and eventually he kept falling and getting up and falling and getting up. There were 70,000 people in the stadium, and the crowd was going crazy. They were encouraging him, and Queen Alexandra was on her feet, and she was screaming encouragement to him, as everyone else was. He fell, and he was picked up and dragged across the line by the British medical team. My grandfather was the second guy into the stadium. He was exhausted, he was sick, he was barely moving. He was about 200 yards from the finish when he was passed by an American runner, Johnny Hayes, who was subsequently was awarded the gold medal after Dorando Pietri was disqualified. My grandfather, Charlie Hefferon, finished the race some 46 seconds behind Hayes and was awarded the silver medal. Some of the reports said that if the race had continued another few hundred yards, Charlie would likely have won it, because by this point he had regained his 5.5 minute per mile clip. For the 70,000 spectators and the royal family, it was such a dramatic event that captured the attention of not only Great Britain, but people around the world. It gave the Olympic Games a certain cachet, which really they didn't have up till that point. A writer of the day had been hired by the Daily Mirror to write about the race, because, as I had mentioned, this race had really attracted a lot of attention and hype, was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle who wrote the Sherlock Holmes series. Sir Arthur had indicated in the race, and in his kind of flowery fashion, that Charlie Hefferon was a perfect physical specimen. So it was kind of ironic that a cup of champagne would have taken him down and reduced him to the shuffling gait of a weekend jogger for the final few hundred yards of the race. I don't think there's a number on this one. Oh, those are yeah, because his number apparently was number 8. Yeah, no, this must not be it. This must be something else.